Thanks for joining us on our weekly AJA Zoom event. My name is Robert Gregory, and also on the screen is Dr. David Adler, President of the AJA. AJA has had a very busy week, and you would have seen many of our interviews across the media, so please apologies if we haven't been able to respond to all the inquiries we get, as definitely a lot of messages coming in. Now, the format for tonight is going to be the same as last week. We're going to start with a 15-minute update from Israel about the situation. If you'd like to ask a question during tonight's episode, the best way, as usual, is to raise your hand with the reaction button. Written questions can also be placed, although we'll see if we have time to get to some. We're going to begin with an update from Barry Shaw of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Barry is a very well-known author, as well as being an expert on Israel, and pleasure to have you, Barry. Take it from here.
Hello.
Yep, ready to roll, Barry.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming on this Zoom call. It's very important for us to know we've got your support. And I'm hoping, although I'm going to give you a lot of bad news, I really need to recruit you to become our home guard, distance as you are, but we need you to get into the fight. Do you want me to carry on, David, or do you want to?
Yeah, you carry on. You've got the floor at the moment.
Okay. Well, how do I begin? Look, October the 7th was a national disaster. It was also a Jewish national disaster. We failed not only the 5,000 murdered, wounded, the hostages, but the 1,000 more who are suffering traumas that they will live them a lifetime. And above all, also, we failed the Jewish people. And the thought that a pogrom, a genocide, would occur within our own borders is unimaginable. We're not over the shock yet. Every day we continue to see new horrors put in front of our eyes. But we have to gather ourselves together, and we have to make some admissions. We admit, a mea culpa, this was a catastrophic intelligence failure, which led to a top leadership failure. This will be dealt with after, hopefully, we've won the war. But however, as I said, there will be a major investigation and certainly heads will roll. But let's move on, because the fight has begun even before our sons, our fathers, our grandsons, in personal cases, are waiting to go into Gaza and eradicate the evil that is Hamas. Everywhere we turn, accusatory fingers are already pointing at us. We're already guilty of humanitarian crimes. We're already being proved guilty of war crimes. The United Nations Secretary General Guterres, he became a spokesman for Hamas when he said that what they did, the obscene ISIS massacres, didn't happen in a vacuum. In other words, he was basically excusing the Hamas slaughter. Guterres could understand why Palestinians would enter Israel, behead babies, rape Jewish girls, and take children and elderly as human shields. And there's pawns in a psychological warfare that's going to be carried out by the Palestinians against Israel. This man must resign. This man never said anything about the Portuguese, because he is Portuguese, who are being held hostage by Hamas. So he's not even speaking on behalf of his own country people. And now, even before we've gone into the ground campaign begins, the judges are already totting up their penalty scores against Israel. In this war, what happened on October the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th will fade in the memory of the people who are waiting to ensnare us. And what you're seeing in football terms is the equivalent of a referee with a yellow card in hand, eagerly awaiting producing the red card so he can drag the Israeli team to the International Criminal Court by letting the other side do the most foul atrocities against us scot-free. There has to be a campaign that Hamas is brought to the International Criminal Court. There is a mountain of evidence to this, and your Australian government must be encouraged to do so directly or through the United Nations, instead of waiting to try and ensnare Israel in human rights crimes, war crimes, etc., etc. We know where we've been on that path before. Look, I make this a very important point. A false narrative is being rammed into the psyche by the progressive pro-Palestinian indoctrinators. They have Hamas, and they don't really represent Hamas, but they do. I want to spell something out, and I want you to take note of this. Check what I say as facts or not, but to use it and use it regularly and pound away at the message. I have done videos and articles making the point that Hamas is Palestine and Palestine is Gaza. Is Hamas, sorry. I don't want you to fall in the trap and say this. Hamas, okay, maybe it's permissible for you to hit Hamas, but don't you dare injure, hurt, or get involved with anybody to do with the poor Palestinians. What connects them all, and here come the facts. What connects them all, the Palestinians and Hamas, is they are all steeped in Jew hatred and terror, and everything else is confusing noise. Let me give you the facts. Every Palestinian leader, every Palestinian political party or organization is terrorist. This isn't just garble. I'll give you the facts. Yasser Arafat, a terrorist. Mahmoud Abbas was a terrorist, is a terrorist. Khaled Mashal, terrorist. Ismail Haniyeh, terrorist. Salah al-Haruri, terrorist. Yahya Sinwar, terrorist. Mahmoud Sahar, terrorist. Marwan Issa, terrorist. The PLO, terrorist. Fatah, terrorist. PLFP, terrorists. They're all part and parcel of the Palestinian Authority. Hamas, terrorist. Islamic Jihad, terrorist. Tell me of one Palestinian non-terrorist political party. There aren't any. Let me give you another fact to use as well. The last national Palestinian election, Hamas won. The Palestinian majority wanted Hamas and voted for it. That was back in 2006. What of today? In April this year, 2023, the students at Birzeit University overwhelmingly elected the Hamas students to lead their student body. Where's Birzeit? It is not in the Gaza Street. Birzeit University is 5 miles north of Ramallah, the seat of the Palestinian Authority. So in other words, within the Palestinian Authority themselves and surrounding them is Hamas. Let me tell you another fact as well. In September, a month ago, the Palestinian Center for Polls and Survey, that is a Palestinian organization, not an Israeli one, not even a neutral one, preferred President Haniyeh to be their president. The polling result was 58% a month ago, before they went into Israel, were voting for the Hamas leader to be their president with an overwhelming majority. Mahmoud Abbas got 37%. That's a minority. But however, if they match again, because of their survey, Marwan Barghouti, a mass murdering terrorist who is serving a life sentence here in Israel, he would beat Haniyeh 60% to 37%. So overwhelmingly, the Palestinians, the poor innocent bystanders, are voting both with their votes and with their methods and with their anti-Semitism for Hamas leaders. Hamas is Palestine. Palestine is Hamas. 78% in this Palestinian poll want Mahmoud Abbas to resign because of his corruption and because he's not doing enough against Israel. That's their voice, not ours. Give you another fact. You may know that the Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas is taking money from various countries, including Australia, who helped fund the Palestinian Authority, and is siphoning up that money for what we call the pay-to-slave policy. It's the reward scheme that any Palestinian who kills a Jew is rewarded, depending on the number of Jews or the importance of the Jews in Israel that they kill. What you don't know is the Palestinian Authority is obligated to give the equal amount of money to the Hamas killers of Israelis and Jews. In other words, the 1,500 that murdered our people over here, or maybe the ones that are alive, certainly will be getting paid by the Palestinian Authority. And in the interrogation that we heard from themselves, two or three of them admitted that they were told that any people, any Israelis, any Jews, whether it's a child, an elderly person, a girl, soldier, anyone, they will be rewarded by $10,000 and an apartment. This is what's going on. These are the Palestinians. Do not isolate it with the small groups they try to put on one side. That's Hamas, but all the others are innocent. I'll give you one final equivalent. When our troops here have to go into places that we handed over to the Palestinian Authority, like Tulkarma, Jenin, and Hebron, and other places, in order to try and arrest their terrorists, whether they're Hamas or Islamic Jihad, if you look at your newsreel carefully, you will see a lot of youth, Palestinian youth, trying to pelt the army as they come in armored vehicles. They're throwing rocks up on them. They're putting up barricades. They're throwing explosive devices. This is happening in Judea or Samaria, call it the West Bank, whatever you want. Now, are those people going to be called innocent bystanders? Because they would not be the target in, as we've done recently in Jenin, gone in to arrest or kill a cell of Hamas terrorists. So these people get a free pass, because to hurt them or to shoot at them would be a human rights crime. This is what's happening or going to happen also in Gaza. I want you to know these facts, follow this video again, and use this argument, because these are horrible, truthful facts, and that your media and your government will not use. If any government official or local official sees the slaughter that went on here, hears the streets chanting gas to Jews, and is neutral, that person is not route neutral. They are aiding and abetting an internationally designated terrorist organization and should be treated as such. To be neutral in this war is to be pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian. You can join us in this battle at every level to demand, for instance, and this is where you come in practically, I want you to contact your government, your politicians, your media, and demand that they go in together with the Red Cross and the United Nations and do their force. When you were talking, or they were arguing about how we attack hospitals when it was Islamic Jihad and Hamas, demand that you get taken to the Shifa hospital in Gaza City, not to be shown around by the Hamas health ministry and show all the people who have been bringing it injured, etc. But have you seen that? Fine. You want to put that out? Fine. But demand to be taken down to the basement of the same hospital. They will refuse to take you. But go there and demand you're taken by the United Nations and by the Red Cross, because you will find in the basement of that hospital perhaps one of the biggest human rights crimes they are avoiding to give you. And that is, in the basement of the Shifa hospital is the headquarters, the military headquarters and the operating headquarters of Hamas. All the leading Hamas terrorists are sheltering there because they know we will never bomb a hospital. It is your duty and your government's duty to do this if you really care for the Palestinian people, if you don't give a damn for the Israelis. But beyond that, you will also ask or demand that the Red Cross and the United Nations take your Australian representative to visit the hostages. Now, I don't know, maybe you can correct me. I don't know or heard of any Australians that are being held hostages. But there are a lot more than just Israelis being held hostages over there. And I think it is the duty of your government, if they really want to look into human rights crime and really try to solve the situation, they'd be taken to visit the hostages and record every one of them and come back and find out who is alive, who is missing, what state of health, both physical and trauma, are they coming through, and issue a report via the United Nations. But you've not heard any of these two essential things as your media and your politicians bleat on about how Israel is about to be produce the most horrendous human rights and war crimes. These are simple things we ask of you to get in the fight with us and take up our arguments, because we're too busy giving our sons and our grandsons and our fathers and our brothers to fight to the death in order to eradicate the evil of Hamas, Palestine, Hamas in Gaza. I'll end on that right now.
There we are. Thank you very much, Barry. Looks like we've had a couple of people come and go. Interestingly, I've got to report to everyone that for this event, we've been busy behind the scenes weeding out a few interlopers, a few inappropriate people. Fortunately, we had our security mechanisms in place, but I guess it happens if you become the most prominent Jewish organisation in support of Israel at this time. Barry, look, thank you so much. You're an established friend of AJA, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you. Much appreciated.
Can I just finish on a couple of notes, because I want to bring our friends here on camera some latest news, and it's important for you to know right now. You should know that we're not only fighting a war in the south against the Palestinian ISIS called Hamas, but we're also getting an increasing war on our eastern front against Hezbollah. And this Hezbollah are ramping up their attacks against Israel day by day. But this morning is something that I reported on strategic things, that the concern, Israeli concern, that Israel could be fighting a war on three fronts. And this morning, the people living on the Golan Heights were hit by some artillery missiles, I think rather than artillery shell, missiles coming in from Syria. And Israel had to attack the source of that, which was a Syrian military base, and we destroyed it. And I understand the score was we killed 3 Syrian soldiers who had fired into Israel. So I want you people to know that this isn't going to be a local Israel, a Palestinian Hamas in Gaza battle, but it could escalate into a much larger war, in which case we will need your help even more.
Great. Thank you, Barry. Robert, are you with us?
Yes. All right. We've got some questions, so we might let's go to Helen. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. I'm very concerned with the fact that we are not talking about Iran in this discussion. As I understand it, Iran is the major funder of all these rogue organizations. So in the long run, what is it going to help if Israel goes in and eradicates Hamas, and they are just in a few years' time refunded, bring up a new guard, and the same thing happens again?
It's a very good point. I deliberately left Iran out of this for the purpose of time, but you're absolutely right. Hamas, Hezbollah are just on us puppets, if you want to call it, very dangerous puppets on the string, which are being pulled by Iran. You're quite right. Israel has been demanding, screaming that the United Nations, the United States governments, administrations, to take Hamas seriously and to do something even in the United Nations in order to bring Iran to, again, the International Criminal Court for clear crimes against humanity and war crimes that they've committed, even against their own people. They failed to do that. We have been tried in the past with Obama, and Benjamin Netanyahu went through great steps in order to bring the facts to the American lawmakers, much to the chagrin of Obama, on why Obama should not reward Iran with billions of dollars, but actually to call them out and isolate them and bring them to the International Criminal Court. He didn't do so. Biden is doing the same game. Biden has been very silent when it comes to Iran. But Iran is, of course, the main operator. This is where the money comes from, where the arms come from. And to have President Biden say there is no evidence of Iran's involvement in Hamas's attack on Israel is ridiculous, damaging, and dangerous. I have more to say about Biden and his visit to Israel, but I'll leave that to one side if you want to get me more questions.
Robert?
Ruvain, you're next. Please ask your question.
Two quick ones. One, the media doesn't show why Israel bombarding. I mean, yeah, we were attacked once, but we're continuing at the moment. Central Israel got bombarded just before today. And then Egypt is allowing the Hamas commanders out on their planes to go to Qatar and to Jordan, etc. I mean, they don't say any of this. Egypt and Jordan together, Hamas supporting them. What can you say?
Okay. I'm not quite sure if I understand your question. Did you mention Qatar?
Yes.
Okay. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned Qatar, because I put out a report a few days ago. It's not been taken up yet, where I put out a report and a proposal that we can end the Hamas problem and solve the problem of Gaza without in a non-violent way. And the key to this, in my report, is Qatar. Now, I have no love for Qatar because this has been one of the sources of radical Islam and everything. But in the report, I do talk about the fact that America have bases in Qatar, and that Qatar also is deeply embedded with Hamas. Qatar in Doha, for instance, the leaders of Hamas are not in Gaza. I talked about Shifa Hospital and underground in there, but the leaders of Hamas are leading a luxury life in Doha. They own 4 apartment buildings in Qatar. The leaders of the operators in Gaza, by the way, the families of the Hamas operatives who are in Gaza, these are the commanders, if you like, their families left Gaza in the days before October the 7th. And most of them went to Doha, and they're living there now. So they're protected. However, if Hamas is ever brought to the International Criminal Court, there's a whole list of people who were there celebrating, living in luxury in Doha, that should be taken to the International Criminal Court. Having said that, my non-violent way of doing this was that I proposed that what should happen is that the Red Cross and the United Nations would escort, first of all, they must make this arrangement via Qatar to Hamas in Gaza, that the hostages will be released, the Hamas terrorists will be protected until all the hostages have been released, and then the Hamas terrorists will be escorted out of Gaza and flown to Qatar, where the Qataris can do what they like to them. One further addendum to this: if any of the members of Hamas who go out of Qatar would be subject to arrest, international arrest, and brought to the International Criminal Court on war crimes charges. Now, what that would do is save whatever hostages are there, get rid of the curse of Hamas. And the third thing is that we can talk about reconstructing Gaza with one restriction in my thing. We do not bring the Palestinian Authority into Gaza to run Gaza. They have failed in the territories that have been given them. They have instigated Jew hatred. They have promoted terrorism, and thousands of Israelis have been murdered by terrorists coming out of the territories controlled by the Palestinian Authority. As I said, Mahmoud Abbas is Palestinian, is Hamas. Yasser Arafat is a Palestinian, is Hamas, whether they want to wave the PLO flag or the PLFP. They are corrupt. The people of Palestine don't even want them. So it's beholden, and this is where the positive thing is. We could reconstruct, not we the Israelis, but Israel together with, for instance, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, the United States can collectively, together with the help of Egypt, because that's a border as well, and Israel, because we're a border, to start to reconstruct Gaza and make it into the paradise that was begin to be done when Israelis were in Gaza and developing it. It could become a paradise. It could become the Côte d'Azur of the Arab world. That would be peace and everything. So I'm proposing not a two-state solution. A two-state solution has failed miserably for 50 years. And the last thing we can do if we manage to overcome Hamas is to continue this fallacy of a two-state solution by turning it into a three-state solution. There should be an independent leadership, not an Israeli one, not somebody from the outside. And I have the candidate to help, with the help of the international community, make Gaza the example we wanted the other parts of the so-called Palestinian territories as possible. And that person is Mahmoud Dawan. I want you to look at my article. I'll send it to you. I'll post it on my Facebook page. He was a member of the PLO. He was a supporter of Arafat, before he became an opponent of Arafat. He was in the Palestinian Legislative Council until he disagreed with everything that the Palestinian Authority were doing and hated their corruption. And he left for the United Arab Emirates, and he became a very successul billionaire businessman. He is a moderating figure, a Palestinian, if you like, in order to govern Gaza until a proper new government is elected with the help of, let's say, the Saudis, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, America, with us being the referee saying yes or no. We don't want to go back into Gaza. We want the Arabs to turn Gaza into a paradise without terror, without anti-Semitism, without hatred of Jews, and another regurgitation of the terror regime. That's my solution. Whether it's going to take place, I doubt it. But this way would be a non-violent way, a three-state solution way to solve what's going on right now. And Qatar is the key to opening the door. Not that they're not malevolent, they are, but they could be the gate. They supported Hamas. They host all the Hamas leaders. Let them take their brave warriors and whatever, the ones that were beheading babies and raping girls. Let them take them back and give them medals of honor in Qatar if they want. But that's my solution. Not been adopted, but take it as it is.
Very good. Someone's asked, what about the son of Hamas? That guy, could he be a leader one day?
I'm in talks right now with people who are involved in the international rules of warfare, that have been involved representing Israel, or know also about the laws connected with the International Criminal Court. I don't want to go into the conversations I'm having with them. There is one thing that's I'll tell you about. A friend of mine who was the military prosecutor in the territories, who's not there anymore, he proposed to the Israeli Knesset before this that imposing the death sentence, the death penalty on any Palestinian terrorist who murdered Jews. It was watered down into a proposal which passed in the Knesset. This is going back about 3, 4, 5 months, saying that if any Palestinian is arrested or caught and with clear charges of murdering Israelis, that they should be deported. That's how it stands right now. I think there is a need in Israel to introduce the death sentence. If it applied to Eichmann, it applies to the Hamas monsters and their leaders.
We might Shoshana, did you have a question? I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just before I start, I'm a little nervous because there are still enemies listening in and posting comments. They're just doing it a little bit more insidiously.
But the enemies are
what I-
always listening. Many enemies of the Jewish people, but don't
Yeah,
worry.
I know. Okay, but what I wanted to say is what we tend to preach to the choir a little bit too much. We know who our friends are, but we also know who our enemies are. And what I've started, and I don't know if I'm right or I'm wrong, but I've started to post on Facebook pages of people that are against us. And what I'll do is get a little sliver of something they've said and show appreciation for it. And then it's just being a little bit more psychologically sophisticated, I think. So, like, for instance, Penny Wong said today she wants, what was it, a humanitarian pause. She didn't say ceasefire. So you can then start commenting about, thank you so much for realizing that a ceasefire would only enable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that we have to start posting where all of the anti-Zionists are posting. And I am getting some blowback, but I really don't care. I think our PR up till now has been shockingly bad. You guys are great. You know no, you are. You're terrific. You're courageous. And you're
do you have a question?
erudite.
Do you have a question?
The question. Yeah, I got a question, David. The question is, why aren't we doing more of that? Why aren't we going to the social media pages of our enemies and trying to be a little more persuasive, be psychologically adept?
Thank you.
Right. You want me to answer that?
Go for it.
Please.
My advice to you is I appreciate what you're doing, but please use your energy more constructively. I don't want to I will never, ever get into a university debate with me on one side and three of our enemies of the other. It's a waste of breath because it's what you should do is forget about the enemies. What you should do is be contacting your government, your mayors, your media, and pointing out not just what these people are saying, but the crimes they are committing. And tell your mayors and your government, this is a battle you can't be neutral about. You can't be neutral on Israel's side. You can't be neutral on the other. If you're neutral, you're in the aid of the enemies. So in your case, and I'm addressing this in other countries, where your mayor in Sydney allows these hordes of anti-Semites shouting, you know what they shout, F the Jews, gas the Jews, then you have to complain to your police, to your government, because these people are citing the death of Jews, not here, but in Australia. They are supporting an internationally designated terrorist organization. That was the reason they went there, not to appeal to Israel to stop because of the poor Palestinians. They were there celebrating and complaining and protesting because in their eyes, they didn't kill enough. And you must go to your media, you must go to your lawyers. I think what you need to do in Australia, if you don't have one, you should copy England and some other places and create the Australian Lawyers for Israel and get some of your top legal brains together and really take on the media and take on your government and take on your municipalities who are siding with Hamas, an internationally designated terrorist organization. That is the way to target who you should be targeting. Don't waste your ammunition on people who are deaf to what you want to say because they hate you. I don't want right this stage to produce a list of these sort of people because your list will be endless. There are more of them than there are of us. You have to do this. First of all, go more high profile in order to addressing it and maybe take some of the experts who are experts in public diplomacy or your lawyers in how to phrase it. And they'll multiply that over the social media and to bring the middle class, the middle ground on board, because they're the hearts and minds, certainly the hearts, maybe the minds that are still open to reason. And they're the ones you need to do. And part of what I presented to you earlier on is part of that messaging, because that's the messaging that people who are sitting on the fence are not sure which dog that resonates to them. That's the target you should do. I hope it helps you, and anybody should help you to, in order to put a group together or groups together, because this is something I've used in our battles in the past. It takes a network to defeat a network. And yours would be a network of good against a network of evil, because that's the war we're facing over here. It's a universal message that runs. Whatever they say, having seen what happened over here, anybody with an open mind and an open heart who may have been neutral are now questioning why they should support the Palestinian cause. And the battle we're fighting has to be presented as a battle of good and evil. This is a clash of civilizations, and the facts are out there for everybody to see. And those are the arguments you have to put forward. And anybody who said, no, 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 Hamas, when they kill us, they're doing it in the name of good, or whether Mahmoud Abbas's terrorists come over here and slaughter people as they've done. And don't forget, I was one of the co-founders of the Netanya Terror Victims Organization, where the guy that came and slaughtered us in the Park Hotel at Pesach wasn't Hamas. He was one of Arafat's people. And we've had people, Mahmoud Abbas's people, coming out in and slaughter us as well. So Hamas is Palestine, and Palestine is Hamas. And we're fighting a clash of civilization here. You're either on the side of good against the side of evil, and we're trying to eradicate the evil of terror. And everybody should be on our side. Anybody is not who is cheering for the other side, that's all. That's the message.
100%. That's a very good message, and I'm sure everyone's noticed AJEA's social media has grown massively. So we're reaching a lot of people, a lot of prominent people, especially. And in the comments, Victor Berger here said he's also commenting a lot. So that's really good. He's keeping busy. Anna, you're up next. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Thank you. How much of what's going on, I mean, Hamas is an authoritarian theocracy, as is Iran. How much of this is based in Islamic preaching and teaching with Muhammad's cursing of the Jews?
It's a good question, because that's the essence of it all.
That's right.
It's the essence. It's the essence not only of Hamas. Go to the Hamas Charter. The day will not come until all the Jews are killed, and then we have to go. Look at the Hamas Charter, for instance. But you could say that's Hamas, they're Islamic, and Islamic Jihad is that as well. But let me give you a couple of anecdotes where, in fact, the so-called secular Palestinian terrorist leaders are soaked in Islamism. I'll give you a little story that I know about Yasser Arafat. After he had signed a so-called peace agreement, the Oslo peace agreement on the White House law with Bill Clinton, and shook hands with Rabin, a very reluctant Rabin, he was also awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yasser Arafat, a mass murderer, hater of Jews, received the Oslo Peace Prize. And he said, I will give you the peace of the brave, and then I mentioned this, he came over and started killing us here in my hometown of Netanya, and I mentioned about the Passover massacre. Why did they pick Passover? To murder the Jews and some Holocaust survivors. And I reached out to somebody I know vaguely, has become a very close friend of mine, and you may know him in Australia, Dr. Mordechai Kedar. And I asked him, what's going on? And he said this. He said, you don't listen to what Arafat tells you, the BBC or Australian media in English. You have to listen to what he tells his own people in Arabic. And he pointed out to me something I didn't know. He was held, and his PLO murderers were driven out from Beirut, from Lebanon. And I was in the IDF there. I've been in Lebanon 3 times, by the way, unfortunately not as a tourist. And he was brought back from Tunis to be allowed in to Ramallah. But on the way, he visited Egypt, and he also went to Johannesburg, and he spoke to a congregation in a couple of mosques who criticized him. Why are you making this peace with the Jews? And he told them, obviously it's in Arabic, and Mordechai Gaydar translated it for me. He said to them, listen to this, and this, he's supposed to be the secular Palestinian leader, terrorist. He said, don't worry, said, waving this piece of paper. This is only the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The congregation knew what the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is. You don't. You don't. What was the Treaty of Hudaybiyah? It was at a time when Muhammad wanted to spread his Islam, and he had taken Medina and wanted to take Mecca. And he went into battle against the Quraysh tribe and lost. And what did he do? He came back and said, look, okay, I have no bad intentions. I'm going to make a peace agreement with you, go in peace. So the Quraysh saw this man, okay, he's going to drop his weapons. We're going to go on, carry on doing our trading business with Mecca as our headquarters. In the meantime, and this is why it's relevant in 2023, because we made peace agreements with the Palestinians when we thought maybe they're not going to keep it, but we were forced to make all these concessions. Totally withdrew from Gaza, of course, which is now illegally Israeli occupied, they say. But coming back to the story, he went away, he armed and trained his people, and while the Quraysh decided to drop their weapons, he came back, won the battle, slaughtered them. And then we have Arafat telling the Muslims, not in Palestine, but in Cairo and in South Africa, this I signed is nothing but the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, meaning, leave it to me. I fool the Jews, they will fall for it, and we will kill them. And what did he do when he came back? This man of peace. He promised us peace of the brave. I can tell you from somebody who was the founder of the Netanya terror victim, he gave us peace of the grave. And he started with the Intifada and ended with this sort of thing. And what you saw on October the 7th was exactly this, where our intelligence people said, oh, they're doing some military exercises, but they don't really want to hurt us and everything because we've obliged, we haven't, there's no Jews in Gaza, right? We've pulled out of most of the so-called West Bank, which is supposed to be controlled by the Palestinian Authority, which is also hotbeds of Hamas terrorism and other terrorist groups. So don't listen to what these people tell you in English. You must get somebody to tell you what they're telling each other in Arabic, because that's where the truth lies.
Okay, let's go to our next question. Who do we have next? Hugh, ask your question.
Hugh Kitson, you can unmute.
Yes, I'm unmuted now. Hi, Barry. How are you?
Very good.
You've already answered the question I was originally going to ask, which was, should Israel reoccupy Gaza, which would be a huge headache? But I'll rephrase it now. Do you think it's necessary for Israel, the IDF, to have overall security responsibility for Gaza long term?
Yeah, first of all, I want everybody to know the amazing work that Hugh has been doing. And I appeal to you to either buy the videos that Hugh has made or help subscribe to him, because he and together with Colonel Richard Kemp are making a new video, and Hugh really should be supported by you. So thank you.
AJA is supporting us very closely. I'm very glad to say, Barry. Thank you.
But from here in Israel, I want to thank you. Really, you're an example of what I call the Christian support of Israel, which often is more enthusiastic than some of the Jewish support of Israel as we go around the world. and they're certainly active, and I want to thank you for your contribution as well. But in answer to your question, as I mentioned before, Israel really has no intention of what you call it reoccupying or remaining in Gaza for any prolonged length of time. There's going to be a vacuum there. And my point of view, and I may be in a minority, is we must not hand it to the Palestinian Authority, because we will get more of the same. I think it has to be arranged by, in the vacuum time that we have, that maybe Saudi Arabia can be brought into the Abraham Accords. And together with us, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United States, to come up with what I would call it, a prolonged temporary solution, that it would be ruled by an Arab. I suppose it would have to be some sort of Palestinian entity. And that's why I mentioned Mohammed Dahlan, because he has cleaner hands than the others. But to bring in Palestinian Authority with their 50 years of corruption, and also the ongoing indoctrination of children of a world without Israel, absolutely not. Absolutely not. If the Saudis can come up with a solution that would not be radical Islam, but maybe even moderate Islam, that's fine. But yes, I don't believe the international community is capable of coming up with an adequate solution. That's my fear, Hugh. And it could well be that we could be bogged there far longer than we want to be. But and then be accused of, here we are, Israel occupying Gaza again. We're occupying it whether we're there or not. But at the same time, we can't allow the current Palestinian Authority to do it. As I said, according to their polling numbers, if they would have an election today, they would have to have a Hamas representative or Marwan Barghouti heading their government, and not somebody who is a person who is a bureaucrat who can bring about a more positive, different world for the Palestinians and model it on a new Gaza model. And I don't know how we're going to do that. But this is something that, first of all, we've got to tread a fairly bloody path before we get to that stage.
The question really was, do you think the IDF is going to have long-term overall security control, even if international players come in?
There are some things I'm privy to, but I'm not going to talk about. But however, the campaign is going to be a long one. We're talking so far in about 2 to 3 months, maybe longer. And part of that would result in a security ring around Gaza, which would be fairly desolated. People will come back and find they don't have homes and things like this. But at the same time, this is a time where we can have our hand on control of Gaza, but reaching out to, say, the United States, our Abraham Accord partners, and Saudi Arabia to come in and sit together and do a solution. So if we have to be the temporary guardians of Gaza, we're doing this. But again, my fear, Hugh, is this, that I don't trust the international community. They've been working 50 years on a two-state non-solution caused basically from the beginning by Palestinian anti-Semitism and terrorism. I don't trust them to come up with any sort of solution.
Yeah, I don't think there's much trust of the international community in this. They always mess everything up. We've got a lot of written questions coming in, a lot of people who want to ask vocal questions. So we'll get to those in a minute. Let's first, maybe David will give us a bit of an update about what is coming up next week. And also we've got something very exciting coming up after this as well. So David. Okay,
well, thank you very much. As we always do, at the end of the event, if you're not yet actively supporting AJA, please go to the website, jewishassociation.org.au, where you can apply to be a supporter. You can make a donation. Make sure you like and follow us on Facebook for frequent updates of news and views, information, and you can subscribe to our email list on the website as well. Next week, we have an extremely special guest. Again, we seem to be attracting people of very high calibre at the moment. And we have Henry Ergas joining us. Henry is one of the great intellectual commentators, analysts, has an extraordinary track record. He published an article in the Australian newspaper last week analysing what Hamas is doing, analysing causation under the title Hatred from Gaza to Lakemba, something really to look forward to next week. And as Robert was alluding to, immediately after we conclude on 3ZZZ, one of the AJA members on the committee makes her debut publicly. Courtney Schneider has been interviewed by Maurice Klein. Courtney has recently been appointed as the AJA Women's and Family Officer. I noticed that we've got Barry Rogers listed for a question, so he's a very special VIP. Barry, if you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, David. I'm concerned about Hamas in our midst, not just in Gaza. How do we defeat an ideology? Why can't we confront this hideous ideology head on with its insidious beliefs? We just get caught up with the crocodile tears of the fallout from this ideology. We don't deal with the ideology itself. How do we do that?
Barry, you can have a go at that and I'll make a comment as well.
You want me to answer that in 30 seconds? No, but the ideology is an important point because, quite frankly, this is what's staining the whole of the so-called free democratic world. What you have here is, first of all, you have the hardened Islamic jihad sort of ideology, which is represented by Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. But then they have cleverly inserted themselves into democratic country with what I call a secular Islamism, and they have connected with the radical left in what I call the Red-Green Alliance. And they have turned your campuses and universities into an industry of lies in which they take impressionable minds and they have turning them with their new ideology into becoming their foot soldiers, if you like. And they find their way into the media and into politics, etc. We saw this happening throughout Europe. And I remember talking at a time of when, do you remember Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the Labour Party and he had adopted the secular Islamic cause and the pro-Palestinian cause, and he really is a front to hide his own anti-Semitism. But the Labour Party became steeped in anti-Semitism in support of the Palestinians. And when I was asked at the time how this came about, I said, you don't understand what's happening in Europe. And by the way, this is happening in Australia. And I said, when the European countries, certainly aided and abetted by the Labour or left-wing politicians, opened their gates to an unbridled migration of people from the Middle East, you know, out of sympathy and support, it was done because a lot of these left-wing politicians who were coming out of the campuses and going into politics at local and national level rubbed their hands with glee and said, I now have a growing voter base that I will promote and help and serve in order to advance my political career. When I'm saying this, you think about your examples in Australia, right? So with that sort of background, they were giving out a message to, for instance, people in Britain, people in Sweden, that this is going to be wonderful. These people are going to come from the middle of it and introduce a new multiculturalism in our country. And then we got 10, 15 minutes, years later, and countries are saying, well, what's going on here? This isn't a multiculturalism. They're starting to do things, commit crimes we never knew before. They're committing statements against our people and other people we didn't like before. What's going on here? And I remember being in Britain and also later in Sweden and said, one thing you don't realize, you haven't realized, that people don't come from the Middle East to become English. They bring the Middle East with them and all the baggage that it contains. I said this earlier this year when Sweden, for instance, swung from the left to the center right. And I was interviewed why this happened. And I mentioned it then. I said, you didn't wake up early enough to what you had imported into your country. And now it's too late to get out of your country. It's already there. What you saw in Sydney was what I said then. You don't bring people from the Middle East to become Australians. They bring the Middle East with them. What you saw in Sydney was part of that. The words they were uttering and part of that, right? So when something happens in the future, and God forbid, an Australian Jew is murdered and the police don't know who did it, you know damn well that this was the start of your October the 7th. And you have a problem here that these people are supported by people from the mayor of Sydney to your foreign minister and other people as well, who say they can't come out openly and say it yet, but they say they're neutral. When that voting body gets bigger and larger, then you will see what side they're on. The danger is here for sure, and we're prepared to go in and fight and die to eradicate it. Question is, in Australia, what steps are you going to take to protect yourself?
100%, no, Barry. All these points you're raising are very, very true, and I think it's been a wake-up call for a lot of people in Australia. We've been very active calling out some of these problematic people, including, as you mentioned, the Mayor of Sydney, the state, federal governments, their response, Penny Wong, local councils. David's been in the media today, I think on Channel 7, on various other places, Daily Telegraph, about Bankstown Council doing all sorts of things. AJ also yesterday had a very high-level meeting with counter-terror police, so just to make sure everything's under control, and it was very reassuring. So obviously the community is dealing with a lot, and you know, it's obviously Israel's dealing with much more, but it's tense times for the Jewish world. But I want to thank you so much for joining us, Barry. You were excellent talk, and you handled those questions really, really well. How can people follow you and keep up to date with the work you're doing?
I'm on. I implore you though to use a lot of the material I'm pumping out every day. I'm giving breaking news, but I'm also giving certain assessments or whatever which must be shared. And you can get that by if you go on my Facebook page. Although Facebook does some shadow banning and filtering, so I'm not sure what I'm putting on is you're actually seeing it your end. But I also have a Telegram app for your phone called The View from Israel. I'm also on LinkedIn. Sometimes I go on Twitter or whatever. Or you can contact me at theviewfromisrael@gmail.com. If you have any questions, you can ask them on my Facebook page or any other way, messenger, whatever. And if you need information, you need material, let me know. I'll be happy to help. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I want to mention again, as David mentioned, coming up, there should be an exciting interview with new AJA board member, Courtney Schneider, with Morris Klein. And as everyone knows, it's 92.3 FM in Melbourne. And for those of us not in Melbourne, you can listen at 3ZZZ.com.au. Next week, we've got this very exciting talk. And we'd also encourage everyone to make sure you're following AJA on all the social medias. Make sure you're getting our email. If you can, financial support is always good. We're putting on a lot of extra things now. Some of you may have noticed there was a couple of anti-Semites infiltrated early on. Don't worry, we noticed them straight away. They were removed. So these type of things are not unusual, but all good. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you again, Barry, for excellent talk. And hopefully we hear better news, and we look forward to seeing everyone again next week for this very interesting talk with Henry Oakes.